deine Arbeit für richtig hältst. Ob du glaubst, dass ich fleißig gewesen bin, dass ich gearbeitet habe, dass ich dich in diesem Jahr für dich eingesetzt habe, dass ich anständig...
I was sitting in that underground room, the one they called the bunker, when I realized the game was over. The walls shook every few minutes, and dust fell from the ceiling like dirty snow. Outside, Berlin was burning, and the Russian soldiers were getting closer with each hour. Everyone around me was losing their minds, screaming about final victories that would never come. But I was calm. I had been calm for days. Ever since I made the decision. The plan was simple, really. Simple enough that no one would believe it if I told them. That's the beauty of simple plans. They hide in plain sight. I had been thinking about it for weeks, watching how the information moved through the bunker, who talked to whom, who believed what. People see what they want to see, especially when they're scared, and everyone was scared. I called in my most trusted doctor, the one who had been with me since the early days. He walked into the room with that serious face doctors always have, like they know something you don't. I told him what I needed. He listened without saying a word, just nodding slowly. Then he left to prepare the materials. The materials, that's what we called them. Just a few medical supplies, nothing that would raise suspicion in a place where people were getting injured every day. Next, I spoke with my personal secretary. He had been typing my words for years, turning my thoughts into official documents. I gave him specific instructions about what to tell the others, what time to announce certain things, how to describe my final moments. He wrote everything down carefully, his hands shaking a little. I could see the doubt in his eyes, but he was too loyal to question me. Loyalty is a strange thing. It makes people do things they don't understand. The bunker had a back entrance that almost nobody knew about. It wasn't on the official maps. It had been built for ventilation originally, a narrow tunnel that led to the sewer system. The engineers who built it were no longer alive, which was convenient. I had discovered it myself during one of my late-night walks through the underground complex. When you can't sleep, you notice things other people miss. I spent those final days in the bunker acting exactly as everyone expected. I shouted at generals. I stared at maps that showed positions we no longer held. I ate meals I couldn't taste. All an act. Every moment was calculated. When you know you're leaving, you see everything from a distance, like watching a play where you're the main character, but also the director. The doctor returned with a small bag. Inside were vials and syringes, things that looked medical, but weren't. We went through the procedure 3 times, making sure every detail was perfect. The timing had to be exact. The witnesses had to be the right people. People who would tell the story convincingly because they believed it themselves. That's the key to any good deception. The people spreading the lie must think it's the truth. I chose the afternoon of April 30th. The Russians were close enough that everyone expected something dramatic. They were waiting for me to either surrender or die. People love dramatic endings. They're disappointed when things just fade away. So I gave them drama. At 3 in the afternoon, I walked into my private quarters with the doctor. 2 of my most loyal staff members waited outside the door. They heard a gunshot. 1 shot, clean and clear. Then they heard the doctor's voice, calling for help, saying it was done. When they entered, they saw what they expected to see. A body on the floor, a pistol nearby, blood on the carpet. The doctor was checking for a pulse, shaking his head. The body wasn't mine, of course. It was a body from the morgue, someone who had died the day before from a bombing raid. Similar height, similar build. In a bunker where people were starving and exhausted, all faces start to look the same. The doctor had prepared it carefully, adding the necessary details to make it convincing. A bullet wound to the temple, just like I had described in my will. People find comfort when things match their expectations. While the others were crying and panicking over the body, I was already in the ventilation tunnel. I had changed into the uniform of a common soldier, complete with dirt and bloodstains from a real soldier who didn't need it anymore. My mustache was gone, shaved clean. My hair was dyed with shoe polish. Simple changes, but effective. When you're running for your life, you don't have time for complicated disguises. The tunnel was dark and smelled of mold and sewage. I crawled through it on my hands and knees, feeling the cold concrete against my palms. Every few meters, I had to stop and listen. The sounds of the bunker faded behind me, replaced by the sound of water dripping and rats scurrying. I wasn't afraid of rats. After what I had seen in the war, rats seemed honest. They just wanted to survive, same as me. The tunnel led to a maintenance shaft that opened into the Berlin sewer system. I had studied the maps for weeks, memorizing every turn. The sewers were a city beneath the city, a place where the unwanted things flowed away, perfect for someone who needed to disappear. The water was cold and foul-smelling, but I waded through it without complaint. Complaining is a luxury for people who have time. I emerged from a drainage pipe in a bombed-out section of the city near the old industrial district. The buildings were skeletons, just bricks and broken windows. The sky was grey with smoke. I walked through the ruins like a ghost, keeping my head down, moving with the shuffling step of a man who had lost everything. There were many such men in Berlin that day. I was just one more. A truck was waiting where I had arranged it, driven by a man who didn't know who I was, only that he was being paid to transport a wounded soldier to a field hospital outside the city. He barely looked at me. People see uniforms, not faces. I climbed into the back and lay down on a stretcher, pulling a blanket over myself. The truck started moving, bouncing over the ruined streets. As we passed through checkpoints, I heard the driver talking to guards. "Just another wounded man," he said. "Nothing special." And they let us pass, because in the chaos of a falling city, nobody looks too closely at the wounded. They're just casualties, numbers in a war that was already lost. We drove for hours, leaving Berlin behind. The sounds of battle grew fainter. When the truck finally stopped, I was in a small village near the Danish border. The driver helped me out, still thinking I was just another soldier. He gave me water and a piece of bread. I thanked him in a voice I had practiced. Hoarse, tired, nothing like my old speeches. Then he drove away, and I was alone. The village was mostly empty. The war had taken all the young men, leaving only the old and the women. I found an abandoned barn and slept there that first night, hidden in the hay. I slept better than I had in months. The weight was gone. The responsibility was gone. I was nobody now, just a man without a name. In the morning, I started walking north. I had a plan, but it wasn't a plan for conquering anything. It was a plan for disappearing. I would make my way to Denmark, then perhaps to Sweden or Norway. From there, maybe South America. There were places in this world where a man could start over, where questions weren't asked if you had a little money and kept to yourself. I had money. Not much, but enough. Gold coins sewn into the lining of my uniform, diamonds in a small pouch around my neck, things that don't ask questions and don't tell stories, things that just are. As I walked through the German countryside, I saw what the war had done. Villages reduced to rubble, fields scorched, people with empty eyes. I had done this, I knew that, but knowing and feeling are different things. In the bunker, it had all been maps and strategies. Out here, it was real. And for the first time, I understood what I had really done. But understanding doesn't change the past, it only changes the future. And my future was simple. Survive. Just survive. That was enough. I walked for days, sleeping in abandoned buildings, eating what I could find. I avoided people when I could, and when I couldn't, I was just another refugee. The war had created millions of us. I was invisible in that crowd. The perfect hiding place is sometimes the most obvious one. When I reached the border, it was unguarded. The guards had abandoned their posts, gone home to protect their own families. I walked across at dawn, through a forest that marked the line between Germany and Denmark. The trees were tall and old. They had seen wars before. They would see wars again. They didn't care about one man walking through them. In Denmark, I found a small fishing village. The fishermen were poor but proud. They didn't ask where I came from. They saw a man who needed work, and they had work to give. I spent a year there, mending nets, cleaning boats, being quiet. I learned to speak Danish with a German accent that I explained away by saying I was from the south. People believed it because it didn't matter enough to doubt. Every night I would sit by the water and watch the sea. The North Sea is cold and unforgiving, but it's also honest. It doesn't care who you are or what you've done. It just is. I found that comforting. After a life spent trying to control everything, it was a relief to be somewhere that couldn't be controlled. But I couldn't stay. Even in that remote village, news traveled. People talked about the war, about what had happened to the leaders. They spoke my old name with hatred. I would sit and listen, saying nothing. I had become good at saying nothing. It's amazing how much people will tell you when you don't talk back. So I moved on. I took a fishing boat to Norway, then another boat to Sweden. In Sweden, I found work in a logging camp deep in the forest. The work was hard, but hard work is good for a man who needs to stop thinking. You cut wood all day, and by evening you're too tired for memories. I lived there for 3 years. 3 years of being nobody. 3 years of silence. I didn't read newspapers, didn't listen to radios. I just worked and slept and existed. But the world doesn't let you disappear forever. The past has a way of finding you, even when you've buried it deep. It found me in the form of a letter. One of the other workers had family in Argentina, and they wrote about a community of German immigrants down there, people who had left after the war. They were building new lives, they said. They were welcoming. They didn't ask questions. I thought about it for a month. Then I made my decision. I saved my money, the little I had earned from cutting wood, and I bought a ticket. Not a direct ticket, those asked too many questions, but a series of tickets. Sweden to Spain, Spain to Portugal, Portugal to Brazil, Brazil to Argentina. A journey that would take months and make me hard to follow. The boat to Brazil was crowded with immigrants, all looking for a new start. I was just another old man in the corner, keeping to myself. I had grown a beard, let my hair go grey naturally. I looked like someone's grandfather, not like the man from the newsreels. Time and hard work had changed my body, softened it, bent it. I was unrecognizable, even to myself. When I finally arrived in Argentina, I made my way to the German community they had told me about. It was in the mountains, a small town where they spoke German more than Spanish. They were good people, these immigrants. They had left Germany for their own reasons, none of them asking about mine. I bought a small house on the edge of town with money from the diamonds I had sold in Brazil. It was a simple house, 2 rooms, a kitchen, a garden. I planted vegetables. I kept chickens. I became the quiet old man at the edge of town, the one who went to church on Sundays but never took communion, who nodded politely but didn't join the conversations. The years passed. They became decades. I watched the world change from my little house and in that bunker. Information moved faster than any army. Sometimes, late at night, I would think about those final days in Berlin. I would think about the body on the floor, the doctor's practiced performance, the tears of people who thought they had witnessed history, and I would think about how easy it had been. Not the escape itself, that had been difficult and dangerous, but the deception. That had been easy, because people believe what they need to believe. I grew old. My hands, which had once signed orders that changed the world, became twisted with arthritis. My back, which had stood straight in front of 1,000 crowds, bent under the weight of years. I became smaller, physically and in every other way. The world forgot about me, and I forgot about the world. But I never forgot. Memory is the one thing you can't escape. It follows you like a shadow, even when you change your name, your face, your life. Especially then. In my garden, I grew roses, red ones, white ones. I would sit among them in the evenings, watching the sun set behind the mountains. The colors were beautiful. They reminded me that even after the darkest times, beauty still exists. It doesn't ask permission. It just is. The people in town called me Herr Schmidt. They thought I was a widower, a man who had lost his family in the war. They were kind to me, bringing me food when I was sick, helping me fix my roof. I accepted their kindness because I had learned that refusing kindness makes people suspicious, and I couldn't afford suspicion. I lived this way for 25 years, a quarter of a century as someone else, long enough that sometimes I almost believed it myself. Almost. But then I would wake up in the night, and for a moment, before I remembered where I was, I would feel the weight of it all again. The weight of what I had done, what I had been, what I had escaped. The irony is that I spent my life trying to create a world where everyone would know my name, and I ended up in a world where no one knew it at all. I had wanted to be remembered forever, and I became someone who would be forgotten immediately. There's a kind of justice in that, I suppose, a cruel, perfect justice. One morning I woke up and couldn't get out of bed. My body had finally decided it was done. I lay there, looking at the ceiling, thinking about how it would end. Not with a gunshot in a bunker surrounded by followers, but alone, in a small house in the mountains with only the sound of chickens outside. I wasn't afraid. Fear is for people who have something to lose. I had lost everything long ago. My name, my power, my country, my beliefs. All that was left was this body, this breath, this moment. The doctor from town came, a young man who had known me only as the quiet old German. He checked my pulse, looked serious, and told me I didn't have long. I thanked him. I asked him to bring me my box from under the bed. He brought it, a small wooden box that had traveled with me from Berlin. Inside were papers, old photographs, things I had kept for reasons I no longer understood. At the bottom was a single photograph of a young man in a uniform, with a mustache and eyes full of certainty. The doctor looked at it, then at me. I saw the confusion on his face, the dawning recognition mixed with disbelief. I told him the truth. Not all of it. There wasn't time for all of it. But the important parts. I told him about the bunker, the tunnel, the body on the floor. I told him about the years of running, the years of hiding. I told him that I had been wrong about everything, that I had understood nothing. He listened, this young doctor, and I could see he didn't know what to believe. Who would? It's a story too strange to be true. But he was kind. He didn't call anyone. He just sat with me as the afternoon light faded. That evening, as the sun set and painted the mountains gold, I asked him to make a phone call for me, not to the authorities, to a historian I had read about, a man who spent his life looking for answers to old questions. I gave him the number I had found in an old journal. The doctor made the call. He spoke quietly, then handed me the phone. The historian's voice was old and tired like mine. I told him who I was, not the name I had used for 25 years, but my real name. The one the world thought had died in a bunker. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked me why. Why had I called him? Why now at the end? I told him the truth, because stories need endings, because history needs truth, even when it's ugly, because I had spent my life telling lies to the world, and I wanted to tell one truth before I died. One true thing. I told him where to find the documents I had kept, the ones that would prove my story. They were in a bank in Buenos Aires, in a safety deposit box under the name Schmidt. I gave him the key, which I wore around my neck next to where the diamonds used to be. Then I hung up the phone. The doctor was still there, watching me. I thanked him for his kindness. I told him not to tell anyone until after I was gone. He nodded. He understood, I think. He understood that some stories are too big for small towns. That night, I dreamed of the bunker. Not as it was at the end, but as it had been in the beginning, when we thought we could change the world. In the dream, I was young again, certain of everything. When I woke up, the sun was rising, and I was still old, still uncertain, still alone. I died that afternoon, in my bed, surrounded by the quiet of the mountains. The doctor signed the death certificate with the name I had given him, Schmidt. He buried me in the town cemetery, in a simple grave with a simple stone. No one attended the funeral. I had outlived anyone who might have cared. But the historian came, weeks later. He found the documents, just as I had promised. He wrote the story, the true story of what happened in the bunker. Some people believed it, most didn't. It didn't matter. The story was out there, a seed planted in the soil of history. And me, I got what I wanted in the end. I escaped. I survived. I lived long enough to see that everything I had believed was wrong. Everything I had built was sand. Everything I had done was dust. The body in the bunker was buried with honors, in a grave that became a shrine for those who still believed. The real me died in a mountain town, unknown and unmarked. 2 graves, 2 endings, neither of them true. That's the thing about stories. The truth is always more complicated than we want it to be, and the endings we plan are never the endings we get. I planned to change the world. Instead, I disappeared from it. I planned to be remembered forever. Instead, I became a question mark in a history book. But I did get one thing I wanted. I got to tell the story myself, in my own words, before the end. Not the story of a leader or a conqueror or a monster, just the story of a man who ran away and kept running until he couldn't run anymore. And now it's done. The bunker is gone. The war is history. And I am just a name that some people remember and most don't. A ghost story, a what if, a maybe. That's all that's left. The doctor kept his promise. He didn't tell anyone until after I was gone. Then he told the historian everything. The historian wrote it all down, and now you know it too. Not because it matters, but because every story deserves to be told, even the ones we'd rather forget.